His job was straightforward: find the traitors, break them, and file the paperwork that made sure nobody ever saw them again. Ree Min-hyuk was North Korea's top interrogator, feared by the public, trusted by the regime, and nicknamed the Iceman because nothing could melt him. If your name landed on his desk, you were already guilty. Then one morning, he opened the list. And the first name staring back at him was someone very special to him, which led him from hunting defectors to becoming one. Before that day, his life was the elite Pyongyang dream, which is to say, comfortable by dictatorship standards, terrifying for everyone else. He lived in a high-rise reserved for top Bo-Weebu officials. Every morning, a black Mercedes collected him. The driver bowed at 90 degrees. Soldiers saluted at the gate like their careers depended on it. Because they did. Inside the interrogation bureau, Min-hyuk ran the show. His tools weren't pens and staplers. They were sleep deprivation, waterboarding, and threats against family. Because nothing says productive workplace like waterboarding equipment in your office supply closet. And nobody left his interrogation room innocent because in the Bo-Weebu, innocent is just a misspelling of guilty. But at home, there was Sujin, his daughter, his only family after his wife's early death. She was the one person who could melt the Iceman. While other officials sent their kids abroad, he kept her close, not just out of love, but because in North Korea, trusting someone else with your child is like handing them a live grenade and hoping they're good at it. The suspected anti-socialist students list was routine. Usually, it featured kids guilty of crimes like owning foreign books or asking too many questions. But this time, the first name was Kim Sujin. Her charges? Criticizing North Korean healthcare, praising Western medicine, because apparently learning about functional healthcare systems is more dangerous than nuclear weapons. A name on that list meant an arrest in 3 days, sometimes less, and he knew exactly what would happen after, because he'd built the process himself. That's when he decided the only way to save her was to break every law he'd sworn to enforce. The plan was simple, on paper. Get to China, meet up with Sujin, and disappear. But paper doesn't have surveillance agents, jungle snakes, or a man you once tortured waiting on the other side. It was a good plan, right up until he landed in Beijing and got the call. They had a tail. Of course they did. In North Korea, they probably follow you to the bathroom just to make sure you're not flushing important documents. Quality assurance really knows no boundaries in the surveillance state. So, Min-hyuk opened the same playbook he'd once used to catch defectors and ran it in reverse. Step 1. Blend into a crowd. Step 2. Pretend to shop. Step 3. Change clothes in a public restroom. Step 4. Slip out the back door like a magician whose only trick is to disappoint the regime. It's like a magician's act, except instead of pulling rabbits from hats, you're pulling yourself out of totalitarian nightmares. It worked. By nightfall, the tail was gone, and they were on their way south. They reunited at the train station without a hug, without eye contact. Just two strangers boarding the same train. Only when they ducked into a side alley did they finally embrace. That's when he told her the truth. She was on the list. If they went back, she'd be in a cell within days. There was no talking it over, no explaining things. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a final sentence without a trial. The jungle crossing was as bad as Min-hyuk had expected. Mud that swallowed your shoes, insects that treated you like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and heat that made you nostalgic for the interrogation rooms. Then, halfway through, another group of defectors appeared. One man stared at him. "You're the Bo-Weebu officer," he said. Not just a Bo-Weebu officer, Min-hyuk was the one who'd interrogated him the year before. Min-hyuk froze. After everything, was he about to be killed in the jungle by his own past? So he asked, "Are you going to kill me?" The man looked at him, then shook his head. "You're in the same situation as us now. I won't resent you anymore." It was the first time the Iceman felt forgiveness, and it hit harder than any interrogation tool. By the time they reached the river, everyone was exhausted, but they had 10 minutes before the patrols circled back. The water was waist-deep and fast-moving. Halfway across, the barking started. Dogs, the advance guard of the border patrol. If the dogs found them, soldiers would be seconds behind. Min-hyuk told Sujin to keep moving, his voice steady even though his heart was pounding like a drum solo. They stumbled onto the far bank and stepped onto Thai soil. No shouting, no gunfire, just the sound of insects and their own breathing. They were out. But Min-hyuk's journey wasn't over. Next stop, a South Korean interrogation room. And nothing in his life prepared him for one that came with snacks. Min-hyuk had imagined South Korean intelligence would look just like Pyongyang's interrogation bureau. Cold room, metal chairs, and a light bulb designed to make you confess to things you hadn't even done. Instead, he was greeted by a polite man in a black suit saying, "Let's eat first. You must be tired." If this had been North Korea, eat first meant watch your interrogator eat while you stayed hungry. Here, they actually brought him food. The room wasn't a cell. It had comfortable chairs, air conditioning, and a computer that didn't look like it belonged in a museum. When he checked for hidden restraints, all he found was a coffee machine. In Pyongyang, the only thing brewing in interrogation rooms was terror. Here, apparently it's a nice medium roast. Meanwhile, Sujin was in a separate room with snacks, fresh clothes, and even a shower. In Pyongyang, the waiting area for a suspect's family was a freezing bench. If you were lucky, the questioning felt like a job interview. If he looked tired, they offered a break. If his throat went dry, they brought him tea. One officer even asked, "Would you like more time to think about your answer?" By the end of the week, the only torture Min-hyuk had endured was having to choose between black bean noodles or sweet and sour pork for dinner. The most difficult decision he'd made in weeks, and nobody's life depended on it. Life in Seoul hit him with culture shock every single day. The supermarket was his first big test. He'd gone in for an electric rice cooker. In Pyongyang, that meant one option: take it or leave it. Here, an entire aisle, different colors, different sizes, some with the more buttons than a fighter jet. In North Korea, choice was an illusion. Here, it was an overwhelming reality with 47 different timer settings. He stood there so long that a store clerk eventually chose one for him out of pity. The city at night was another revelation. In Pyongyang, darkness was the norm. Here, neon signs lit the streets past midnight, and women walked alone without fear. Instead of control through fear, there was safety through visibility, an idea so foreign to Min-hyuk it felt like science fiction. But then came the protests. One afternoon, he saw hundreds of people shouting at the government. In North Korea, that would last about 30 seconds before the arrests began. However, here, the police were just watching, making sure nobody got hurt. But the biggest transformation wasn't Min-hyuk's. It was Sujin's, because once she had freedom, she didn't just adapt. She exploded into a whole new person. If freedom hit Min-hyuk like a slow sunrise, it hit Sujin like a lightning bolt. The moment she learned she could watch medical lectures online for free, she became a full-time resident of the dining table. Tablet in front of her, eyes locked like she was performing brain surgery on the screen. Her world expanded overnight. She learned to text. She learned to video call. She learned about K-pop concerts and immediately added "See my favorite idol live" to her life goals, right next to become a doctor. Even simple decisions were thrilling to her. Choosing clothes at a store, deciding on a haircut. In North Korea, choices were something the state made for you. Here, she could just point at something and have it happen. Their government-subsidized apartment wasn't large, but to them, it was a mansion. Running water that flowed 24/7, electricity that worked whenever they flipped a switch, and a view of the mountains from their balcony. The concept of reliable utilities was so foreign to them, it might as well have been magic. At night, Min-hyuk began a new habit. Every day, he wrote in a diary what they'd done, what they'd learned, how they'd felt, and he ended every entry with the same sentence: "Today, we are free." For decades, he'd been the man who decided who lived in fear and who didn't. Now, he was a father learning to live without it, and in his heart, he carried one hope, that someday, others still trapped in North Korea would get to feel what he and Sujin felt now. Not just the relief of crossing a border, but the quiet daily joy of choosing your own life and being able to subscribe to Rice Degree.